The galaxy was old. Stars were born, burned bright, and died in silence. Across those stars, countless species rose to greatness while men fell just as easily. Among them existed a race known as the Zerath Dominion. To them, war was not a necessity. It was art. It was the hunt. The Zerath believed that strength was the only truth of the universe. To show mercy was to insult nature itself. For thousands of years, they traveled from one world to another, destroying entire civilizations. They did not conquer planets to rule them. They hunted species to extinction, keeping their skulls as trophies, their cities as ruins, and their histories as forgotten dust. When the Zerath fleets appeared in a star system, the end always followed. They came in massive black ships that blotted out the sun, their hulls marked with strange glowing patterns. They would send one message to every world before the slaughter began. Run if you can. Hide if you must. It will not save you. Entire species tried to resist in the Serathi, the Vaktar, the Luran, but all were crushed. Some fought bravely. Others begged for mercy. None were spared. The Zerath called themselves the perfect evolution. They believed the galaxy was their hunting ground and every other life form was prey. Then one day, their long-range sensors found a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. They called it Terra 7, though its people called it Earth. At first, they thought little of it. Primitive, they said. A species barely out of its cradle, still using combustion engines and metal bullets. Easy prey. Nothing worth their time. Until they noticed something strange. In less than 1,000 years, this species had gone from riding animals to walking on the moon. In the time it took other races to learn spaceflight, humanity had already built colonies, satellites, and AI systems. They were growing fast, too fast. The Zerath War Council watched them for 50 years. They observed wars, peace treaties, inventions, and ambitions. Humanity was clever, dangerous, unpredictable, and most importantly, they did not fear death. That made them interesting prey. So the Zerath decided to hunt them. When the invasion began, the sky over Earth turned dark. Zerath dreadnoughts entered orbit without warning. Their first strikes were clean and merciless. In seconds, satellites burned, power grids died, and the planet's defense systems went silent. Cities across the world saw bright lines cut through the clouds, energy beams from orbit. New York, Beijing, Karachi, London, and dozens more were erased in the first hour. People screamed, ran, fought, but there was nowhere to run. Every government tried to respond, but communication broke down. Armies were destroyed before they even reached their targets. The Zerath didn't talk. They didn't demand surrender. They simply killed. Within 3 days, more than half of Earth's population was gone. The survivors hid wherever they could. Underground bunkers, mountain caves, deep-sea stations. They watched their world burn through cracked screens and broken radios. The Zerath landed ground troops to finish the hunt, scanning for heat signatures and life signs. They called this the Great Cleansing. For them, it was sport. For humanity, it was the end of everything. In orbit, aboard the flagship Zarquil, the Zerath warlord Karzan stood before a massive screen showing the burning Earth. His red eyes glowed with pride. "Another hunt complete," he said coldly. "Mark the planet as cleansed." A younger officer bowed. "Warlord, there are reports of survivors in underground zones. Should we send sweepers?" Karzan smiled, showing razor-sharp teeth. "Let them hide. It changes nothing." "They are already extinct," he turned away, bored. The fleet would move on soon. There were other systems to hunt, other species to erase. To the Zerath, humanity was finished. But Karzan was wrong. Beneath the surface of Earth, deep under the ruins of old cities, humanity was not extinct. They were learning. In one of the few surviving bunkers, a man named Captain Elias Ward looked at a holographic map filled with red zones, places lost to the Zerath. Around him sat a dozen men and women, soldiers, engineers, scientists, and civilians, the last of Earth's defense force. "Every signal we send gets jammed," one of them said. "We can't contact Mars base or the lunar colonies." Elias nodded grimly. "Then we do it the hard way. We rebuild what we can down here. We find a way to hit them back." A young engineer named Lara Voss looked up, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. "Hit them back? Against them? We have nothing left." Elias stared at her. "We have us." There was silence in the room, but his words carried weight. Humans had lost everything, cities, families, their world. But something deeper burned within them. The same thing that had driven them to explore space in the first place. The same thing that made them rise after every fall. Hope. That night, the survivors made a pact, not to rebuild Earth, but to make sure the Zerath never forgot humanity. They would wait, learn, and strike when the time was right. Years turned into decades. Decades became a century. The Zerath never returned to Earth. They believed it was dead. But underground, beneath layers of dust and silence, the descendants of those first survivors built a new world, the Burrows. Children grew up hearing stories of the sky that once shone blue and oceans that once sparkled. They also learned of the monsters that took it all away, and with every generation those stories became purpose. Old technologies were repaired. Alien debris scavenged from fallen Zerath machines was studied and re-engineered. Humanity began to understand the science of their hunters. Plasma weapons, anti-gravity drives, cloaking fields. They improved them, modified them, made them their own. They no longer saw themselves as victims. They became something new, silent, patient, and united. Far away in a distant galaxy sector, rumors began to spread. Zerath patrol fleets started disappearing. Outposts went dark. Trade convoys vanished without a trace. At first, the Dominion dismissed it as pirate activity, but soon they found wreckage. Ships torn apart by weapons that used Zerath technology, but were somehow faster, sharper, more efficient. The Zerath warlords grew suspicious. "Who dares attack the hunters?" they asked. No one had the courage to answer. But deep in the shadows between stars, a single human transmission whispered across subspace. A signal too faint for most to catch. It carried just 3 words. "We are coming." Back on Earth, under the cold stone of what was once Colorado, an ancient bunker door opened. For the first time in 100 years, sunlight poured into a command chamber. Dozens of humans wearing sleek adaptive suits gathered around a massive vessel buried beneath the rock. On its hull was written a single name, ISS Vengeance. Captain Elias Ward's great-granddaughter, Commander Arya Solon, stood at the edge of the launch bay. Her eyes, sharp and determined, reflected the glowing engines of humanity's first true warship. "Today," she said, her voice echoing across the chamber, "we stop running. They hunted every species in this galaxy. They believed no one could challenge them." She turned toward her crew, every face filled with quiet fire. "Let's prove them wrong." The engines roared to life, shaking the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling as the great ship rose slowly, cutting through layers of stone and earth, reaching for the sky that humanity had lost so long ago. And when it broke through the clouds, the stars above seemed to shimmer, as if the universe itself remembered that the humans were still here. The hunters had created their own end without knowing it. Because somewhere out there, among the countless stars, the hunted had become the hunters. 100 years had passed since the skies of Earth burned red. What was once a green and blue world had become a graveyard of steel and ash. Cities that once touched the clouds were now silent ruins. The oceans had turned dark with dust. No birds sang, no engines roared, and no laughter echoed through the streets. Only the wind moved, carrying the whispers of a world that had refused to die. Yet beneath the ashes, humanity lived. The survivors who had hidden in bunkers, deep caverns, and secret colonies had built something new, a civilization forged in the shadows. They called it the Burrows, a vast network of underground cities stretching across continents. Inside, people worked, studied, and dreamed beneath artificial suns made of old reactor light. Children grew up hearing the stories of the old world, of blue skies, rain, and forests. They also heard about the invaders, the Zerath Dominion, the ones who came from the stars and took everything. For the young, these were not just stories. They were lessons. To survive, they learned patience. To rebuild, they learned science. To fight back, they learned everything about the enemy. In the deep tunnels of what was once North America, a command base buzzed with quiet activity. Scientists studied alien energy cores. Engineers repaired old machines, and soldiers trained in silence. The old flag of Earth, faded and torn, still hung in the command hall. At the center of it all stood Commander Arya Solon, great-granddaughter of Captain Elias Ward, the man who had led humanity's first resistance a century ago. She had his same steady eyes, the kind that had seen both loss and hope, Arya stared at a holographic display showing the galaxy map. Red marks showed Zerath-controlled zones, hundreds of them. Blue lights marked what was left of human influence. Only a few scattered colonies on Mars, the Moon, and hidden outposts across the outer rim. Still outnumbered, said Dr. Lara Voss II, the chief scientist, named after her great-grandmother. Even after all this time, Arya nodded. Outnumbered, yes, but not outsmarted. She zoomed in on a red mark blinking near the outer rim. This is our first target. A Zerath outpost on Delta 9. Small but strategic. If we hit it, they'll feel it. A soldier standing nearby frowned. Commander, if we attack them, they'll know we still exist. Arya's eyes hardened. Good. It's time they remember who we are. 2 weeks later, the ISS Vengeance, humanity's first warship built entirely from a mix of Earth and Zerath technology, rose into orbit. Its hull gleamed black and silver, shaped like a blade against the stars. It carried not just weapons, but the pride of an entire species. Inside the ship, hundreds of crew members moved with precision. The youngest among them had never seen Earth's sky, yet they felt its weight in their hearts. Every person on board carried the same thought. This is for home. The launch was silent. No celebration, no music. Only the steady hum of engines as the ship disappeared into deep space. Their mission was simple. Test the ship. Gather intelligence and, if possible, strike the enemy. For weeks, the Vengeance moved through the void, hidden under stealth fields. The crew trained endlessly, preparing for the moment they would face the species that had once called them prey. In the control deck, Arya sat beside her second-in-command, Lieutenant Mason Rhee, watching the stars stretch into streaks of light. Hard to believe this is the same galaxy that feared them, Mason said softly. It still does, Arya replied. But that ends with us. Her tone was calm, but her hands tightened around the armrest. She had seen old recordings of the invasion, the burning cities, the screams, the helplessness. It haunted her, but it also drove her. She had promised herself that humanity would never be helpless again. On the 12th day, they reached Delta 9. It was a small desert planet, used by the Zerath as a resource hub. From orbit, they could see metallic towers rising like claws from the sand, guarded by 3 enemy ships. The Zerath had no idea that the prey they once hunted was now watching them. Commander, stealth system stable, reported Mason. Targeting data locked, added the weapons officer. Fire only when I give the order, Arya said. Let's see what they've learned since they burned our world. The Vengeance moved silently into position, cloaked in the void. Inside the control deck, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Every crew member knew this mission could change everything. If they failed, humanity's hiding place could be exposed. If they succeeded, the hunt would truly begin. Minutes passed. The Zerath ships orbited lazily, unaware of the danger. Then, with a quiet nod from Arya, the human warship unleashed its fury. 2 plasma lances shot out, invisible beams of blue light that tore through the darkness. In seconds, the first Zerath ship exploded in a silent flash, debris scattering like fireflies. The other 2 reacted too late. The Vengeance moved faster than any human ship before it, firing again and again, cutting through the enemy like lightning through clouds. Within minutes, all 3 Zerath vessels were gone. The planet's surface defenses activated, sending energy bolts toward orbit. But the Vengeance's shields absorbed them easily. Arya gave her next order without hesitation. Drop payload. Let them know the dead still speak. The ship released a series of drones, each carrying a message encoded in the Zerath language. The message was short, only 4 words. Humanity remembers, we return. Then the Vengeance disappeared into the void before the enemy could react. Hours later, in the far reaches of Zerath space, panic spread. The Dominion had not heard that word, humanity, in a century. To them, Earth was a forgotten victory, a dead world. Now, suddenly, reports came in of human weapons, human signatures, and destroyed fleets. The High Command met in their crystal chambers, their voices filled with disbelief. Impossible, one growled. The humans are gone. We made sure of it. Then explain the wreckage of Delta 9, shouted another. Explain the human words burned into our outpost. Silence fell. At last, a cold voice spoke from the shadows. Overlord Karzan, now ancient, but still feared. "We ended them once. If they rise again, we will end them again." But even as he said it, his claws trembled. Somewhere deep inside he knew what he had always feared, that the humans were different. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. But they were the most dangerous kind of species, the kind that learned. Meanwhile, aboard the Vengeance, the crew celebrated quietly. No cheers, no loud victory, just a shared silence of triumph. Mason looked at Arya with a faint smile. "We actually did it. First human victory in 100 years. Arya nodded, her eyes still fixed on the stars. "It's only the beginning. They'll come for us now." "Then what do we do?" Mason asked. She turned to him, her voice calm but fierce. "We do what humans always do. We adapt, we fight, we survive." Back on Earth, the news spread through the underground networks. For the first time in generations, the people of the burrows heard something they had not heard in a long time, and hope. Children gathered around screens, watching the faint transmission of the Vengeance's emblem, a human hand holding a burning star. It became a symbol of resistance, painted on walls and carved into metal plates. People whispered it like a prayer. They hunted every species. But not us. Not anymore. In a quiet moment, Arya stood alone in her quarters, looking at an old, cracked photograph of Earth, oceans, clouds, and sunlight. She traced it gently with her fingers and whispered to herself, "For you, old world, we're coming back." Outside her window, the stars shone brighter than ever. Countless points of light in the endless dark. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and this time they were not prey. The message had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Humanity returns. Those words were whispered in markets, on trade ships, and in hidden rebel stations. For some, it was a tale of hope. For others, a nightmare reborn. The Zirath Dominion, rulers of thousands of worlds, had not felt fear in centuries. They had built their empire through terror and destruction. Yet now fear began to creep into their ranks, a quiet, invisible thing that traveled faster than light. At first, the reports were small. A convoy disappearing near the outer rim, a mining colony destroyed overnight, a fleet beacon going silent. But soon patterns emerged. Every attack was clean, swift, efficient, and in every wreckage, the same symbol was found burned into the metal, a hand holding a burning star, humanity's mark. Aboard the ISS Vengeance, Commander Arya Solon stood before a projection of the galaxy. Red lines marked enemy supply routes, blue circles marked possible human allies, former enslaved species who had once feared the Zerath. The ship had become more than just a weapon. It was a legend. It moved unseen, striking where the Zerath least expected. Every mission inspired hundreds of hidden cells to rise. Humanity had started something far greater than revenge, a rebellion across the stars. "Commander," said Lieutenant Mason Rhee, walking up beside her. "The next target is ready. A communication hub on Corthus Fur. It controls signals for 3 sectors. Arya nodded, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "If we take it down, their fleets will be blind in this region. Let's move." The Vengeance slipped through the void under stealth mode. Its black hull absorbed the light of nearby stars. Inside, every system hummed quietly. "Entering Corthus orbit," reported the navigator. "Enemy count?" 5 defense ships, 2 orbital cannons, and ground troops." Mason gave a sharp smile. "Nothing we can't handle." Arya's eyes stayed on the holographic display. "We're not here to destroy. We're here to send a message. Disable communications, then vanish." Moments later, the human warship appeared out of cloak, guns blazing. The first defense ship exploded instantly. The second followed seconds later. The Vengeance moved like a ghost, fast, deadly, and precise. The orbital cannons fired, but the human ship's shields shimmered and held strong. With a burst of plasma, the Vengeance fired a focused pulse into the planet's communication tower, disabling it completely, and before the Zerath could react, the human ship was gone. When the smoke cleared, the tower's surface burned with words written in bright, blue fire. "We remember Earth." In the command chamber of the Zerath High Council, chaos reigned. "Another attack?" "Yes, Overlord. The humans again. They are ghosts. How can a dead race fight back? They use our own technology, improved beyond anything we imagined." The room filled with angry voices. Their claws clattered against the metal floor as they argued, each blaming the other. Finally, Overlord Karzan, The same warlord who had led the destruction of Earth a century ago slammed his fist on the table. Silence. The others stopped immediately. His red eyes glowed with fury. We are the hunters of the void. We do not hide. We do not fear. Find these humans and end them. But even he knew deep inside that the tide was turning. The humans were not simply fighting back. They were changing the rules of war. Back aboard the Vengeance, the crew worked silently in the aftermath of another victory. The ship's systems hummed with life, the glow of the stars washing over the bridge. Arya stood by the viewport watching the remains of a destroyed Zerath station drift in space. Her reflection showed tired eyes, but not weak ones. "Commander," Mason said quietly, "our attacks are spreading faster than we expected. Resistance groups on other planets are asking for support. They want to join us." Arya turned, a small smile forming. "Then we teach them what it means to be human." Soon, humanity's influence began to spread. On the jungle world of Rathan, enslaved alien workers found caches of human weapons, rifles marked with the symbol of the burning star. On the icy moons of Vaster, rebels received transmissions in ancient Terran code, and across 1,000 dark worlds whispers grew. The humans fight back. They became a shadow army, unseen, unpredictable, unstoppable. For every Zerath attack, 10 human strikes followed. Supply lines vanished. Outposts were captured. Data cores were stolen. Even their high command struggled to understand how such a small force could cause such chaos. The truth was simple. Humans adapted. They learned from every battle, improved every weapon, and never repeated the same mistake twice. The Zerath, used to crushing their enemies with brute strength, could not keep up with a foe that fought like smoke. Always moving, always watching, but victory came with a price. The Vengeance had been fighting non-stop for months. Its engines strained and its crew grew tired. Some had not seen their families in years. Others had no families left at all. One night, as the ship drifted through a silent nebula, Mason found Arya alone in the observation deck. She was staring at the stars again, her hand resting on an old metal pendant shaped like Earth. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. The cities burning, the people screaming. I was born underground, but I still feel it. Like the planet's memory lives in me." Mason sat beside her. "We're making them pay for it, Arya, every day." She gave a small, sad smile. "It's not about revenge anymore, Mason. It's about balance. The galaxy lived in fear for too long. It's time someone reminded it what courage looks like." He nodded slowly. "And that someone is us." Days later, a new message reached them from a hidden outpost. The Kellen colony, one of the last surviving human settlements outside Earth. The message was short, but urgent. "They found us. We need help." Without hesitation, Arya ordered the Vengeance to change course. When they arrived, the colony was under attack by a Zerath fleet. Dozens of ships surrounded the small moon where humans had built homes in secret. Fires burned on its surface. "Status?" Arya demanded. "Shields are failing," the comm officer said. "If we don't act now, they'll be wiped out." Arya stood tall, her eyes hard. "Then let's give the Zerath something to remember." The Vengeance dropped out of stealth directly above the battle. In seconds, its cannons lit up the void. Plasma beams and kinetic slugs tore through the enemy ranks. Zerath ships exploded like fireworks across the stars. Inside the colony, the trapped humans watched in awe as the massive warship fought for them. For the first time in their lives, they saw hope descend from the heavens. The Zerath fleet tried to retreat, but Arya's voice echoed through space. "No mercy for hunters." Within minutes, the battle was over. The survivors on the moon cheered as the Vengeance hovered above them. Arya ordered supply drops and medical aid to the surface. For those people, the warship wasn't just a machine, and it was a promise. As the Vengeance left orbit, Mason looked at Arya. "We saved them. But you know what this means. The Zerath won't stop now. They'll come with everything." Arya nodded. "Let them. We'll be ready." She turned toward the stars again. They hunted every species in this galaxy. They thought fear would keep them safe. But they forgot the one rule of the hunt. Mason raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Her voice was calm but fierce. "When the prey learns to fight back, the hunter becomes the hunted." Back in Zerath space, Overlord Karzan stared at the latest reports. Hundreds of destroyed ships, missing officers, captured territories. The humans had done what no species had ever done before. They made the Zerath afraid to go to war. He clenched his claws, his voice a low growl. If they want war, we will give them war. But even he knew that war had already changed. It was no longer about who had the bigger fleet. It was about who could survive longer in the dark, and in that darkness humanity thrived. Because they had been born in fire, forged in loss and reborn in silence. The galaxy had forgotten them once. It never would again. The stars were no longer silent. For centuries, the Zerath Dominion had ruled the galaxy without question. Their fleets had crushed hundreds of civilizations. Their warlords had erased entire species. But now something had changed. Their ships were burning. Their outposts were falling. And the name of their new enemy echoed across every system: humanity. Commander Arya Solon stood on the bridge of the ISS Vengeance, her eyes fixed on the holographic map that showed the expanding blue zones, territories freed from Zerath control. It had taken years of war, stealth, and sacrifice, but humanity was finally turning the tide. Across the galaxy, alien species that had once hidden in fear now rose beside humans. The Voktar, once nearly extinct, now flew alongside human fleets. The Lurin, a gentle aquatic race, used their science to build powerful energy shields. Even the insectoid Trithan, who had been enslaved for generations, fought under the Terran banner. Everywhere, the same message spread: the humans fight for us all. What began as a mission of survival had become something greater, a war of liberation. In the council chamber aboard the Vengeance, Arya stood before her officers, Lieutenant Mason Rhee, Dr. Lara Voss II, and representatives from the allied species. The air was heavy with tension. Mason looked at the map and said quietly, "We've taken back 70 systems in less than 2 years. But the Dominion still controls the core worlds." Dr. Lara nodded. "That's where Overlord Karzan hides, in the fortress world Erebus Prime. If we can destroy it, the Dominion collapses." A Voktar general spoke, his voice deep and rough. "Many have tried to breach Erebus. None have returned." Arya's expression didn't change. "Then it's time someone did." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. The final strike, the one that could end 1,000 years of Zerath rule, would be led by humanity. Far away, in the dark heart of the Dominion, Overlord Karzan stood in his throne chamber. The walls were covered with trophies, bones, armor, and relics from the species he had destroyed. Now those trophies mocked him. Every report that came in spoke of defeat. Every message was another failure. The once proud Zerath armies were being hunted like animals. An officer entered the chamber, trembling. "My lord, our fleets near the Varan Belt have fallen. The humans—" Karzan raised a clawed hand. "I know. I can smell their fire." He turned to the large window showing the stars beyond. "They think themselves clever. They think vengeance makes them strong. Let them come. We were hunters long before they learned to walk." But even as he said it, he could feel doubt gnawing inside him. The Zerath had become slow, arrogant, too sure of their dominance. The humans, on the other hand, they were growing sharper with every battle. For the first time in his long life, Karzan felt something unfamiliar. It was not anger. It was fear. The Terran Vanguard fleet, now made of hundreds of ships, human and alien alike, gathered near the edge of Zerath space. The massive carrier TFS Horizon floated beside the Vengeance, both surrounded by escort ships glowing with blue and silver light. It was the largest fleet the galaxy had seen in centuries. Arya stood before her crew, her voice carried through every communicator. "A century ago they burned our world. They hunted us to near extinction. But we endured. We adapted. And now we end this." Across dozens of ships, thousands of soldiers raised their fists in silence. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for memory, for freedom, for the future. The assault on Erebus Prime began with light. Millions of plasma beams lit up the darkness as the combined fleet engaged the Zerath Armada. The void between stars became a battlefield, flashes of blue and red bursting across the endless black. The Zerath had numbers, but humanity had strategy. While the enemy focused on the larger ships, smaller Terran stealth units slipped through their lines, disabling power grids and communication relays. Luran shield ships protected the main fleet while Triton drones swarmed enemy engines. Arya's voice echoed through the command deck. Focus on their flagships. Take out their command ships. Cut the head and the body will fall. The Vengeance roared through the battle, firing volley after volley. Its hull glowed from the energy, but its spirit never broke. On the surface of Erebus Prime, the Zerath fortress stood like a mountain of black steel, surrounded by storms of plasma and ash. Inside, Karzan prepared his final defense. He looked out at the sky, now burning with streaks of light, human dropships descending like meteors. Let them come, he hissed. Let them see what true power is. Arya led the landing personally. She and a team of elite soldiers, humans and allies, stormed through the fortress gates. Explosions shook the ground as Zerath warriors fought desperately, but their discipline was gone. They fought out of fear, not strength. Forward, Arya shouted. For Earth, for the fallen. Her voice echoed through the halls as the team pushed deeper, step by step. Mason fought at her side, his armor scorched, his weapon glowing with heat. At last they reached the central chamber. There, waiting on a throne of iron and bone, was Overlord Karzan. His red eyes glowed like fire as he rose to face them. So, he said slowly, his voice deep and sharp. The children of Earth come to finish what they started. Arya stepped forward, weapon raised. You started it. We're here to end it. Karzan smiled, cold and cruel. You are brave, human. But bravery cannot save you. He moved faster than any human could see, his claws slashing through the air. Arya dodged, rolling across the floor as energy blades clashed. Sparks filled the room. The soldiers around her fired, but Karzan's armor absorbed the shots. Mason yelled, Arya now! Arya triggered a charge hidden on her belt. It exploded beneath the throne, breaking the floor open. Karzan stumbled, roaring in rage. You think you can destroy me? I am eternal. Arya aimed her rifle directly at him. No, you're extinct, she fired. The beam struck Karzan square in the chest. His armor cracked and light burst through it. He staggered, fell to one knee, and then collapsed as the fortress began to crumble. Arya and her team ran as the building shook apart. They escaped aboard their shuttle just as the fortress exploded in a wave of light. From orbit, the Terran fleet watched as the black world of Erebus Prime was consumed by fire. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Mason turned to Arya, who stood silently watching the burning planet. It's over, he said quietly. We did it. Arya didn't answer at first. She looked out at the stars, remembering the generations who had died for this moment. The first survivors who hid underground. The scientists who rebuilt in secret, the soldiers who never came back. At last, she whispered, No, Mason, we didn't do it alone. Humanity rose because the galaxy stood with us. This victory belongs to everyone they hunted. He nodded slowly. Then what now? Arya looked at the stars, countless, endless, free. Now we rebuild. But we'll never forget, because the moment we stop remembering, we become like them. Weeks later, the news spread through every corner of the galaxy. The Zerath Dominion has fallen. Planets once enslaved lit their skies with celebration. The symbols of the Dominion were torn down, replaced with new banners, the emblem of unity, showing a hand holding a star. Humanity was no longer a legend or a ghost. They were the light in the darkness, the reminder that even the smallest flame can burn the strongest shadow. And on the quiet, reborn Earth beneath a sky that was blue once again, children played freely for the first time in centuries. In the rebuilt capital of New Terra, a statue stood in the city square, a woman holding a rifle in one hand and a torch in the other. Beneath it were carved simple words. We were hunted. We endured. We rose. The hunters were gone. The hunted had become protectors. And across the galaxy, whenever a new danger arose, one name was spoken with both respect and fear: humanity. The galaxy was quiet again. After decades of war, after the fall of Erebus Prime, most of the Zerath Dominion had been destroyed. Entire fleets lay in ruins, their outposts abandoned and their worlds free. Humanity, alongside their allies, had rebuilt order where fear once ruled. But the galaxy remembered one thing. There was still one Zerath left. The last warlord, Velkor, had escaped the final assault. He was cunning, fast, and filled with rage. Unlike Karzan, who had underestimated humans, Valkor had learned from every failure. He hid in the uncharted shadows of the Outer Rim, gathering the last remnants of loyal followers, plotting one final hunt. He believed that if he could kill enough humans, he could restore fear and rebuild the Dominion from ashes. But humanity had changed. They were no longer prey. On the Vengeance, now fully upgraded and commanded by Commander Arya Solon, the fleet patrolled the edge of explored space. Allied species formed a protective ring around human territories. The galaxy had learned to trust them, but vigilance was constant. "Commander," Lieutenant Mason Rhee said, pointing to the scanners, "we've detected unusual energy readings near the Clintar Nebula. It's advanced weapons tech, old Zerath style but upgraded." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Show me everything." The maps displayed a fleet of shadow ships, scattered but dangerous. The name Valkor didn't appear in their databases, but the pattern was clear. This was no ordinary raiding party. Someone trained them, organized them. Someone hated humanity enough to plan revenge. "Prepare for engagement," Arya said. "This is the last hunt, and we will end it." The Vengeance moved with silent precision through the nebula. Misty clouds of gas distorted their sensors, giving the Zerath cover. But humans had learned to fight in the shadows. Stealth systems masked their approach, shields at maximum. "Weapons ready," reported the tactical officer. The first sign of battle came as a fleet of shadow ships appeared suddenly, firing plasma arcs into the darkness. One vessel exploded instantly, but more followed. Valkor was testing them. Arya's hand hovered over the console. "Focus fire on the command ship. The rest will scatter once their leader is gone." Inside Valkor's flagship, the last Zerath warlord watched the approaching humans. His eyes glowed red in the darkened room. "So the ghosts of Earth come for me," he hissed. "They think they can hunt me? I am the last shadow of the Dominion." His officers looked nervous, but he ignored them. He had learned the humans were clever, but arrogance ran in his veins. He would make them pay for every defeat the Dominion had suffered. "Prepare the kill fields, trap them. Let the hunt begin." The battle erupted in the mist of the Clintar Nebula. The Vengeance and allied ships darted through clouds of gas and debris, firing, dodging, and striking with precision. Valkor's fleet was smaller, but his traps were deadly. Energy nets and gravity wells tore through allied vessels. The humans adapted instantly, using rapid maneuvers and EMP pulses scavenged from old Zerath tech. "He wants us to fight blind," Arya said, her voice calm but sharp. "We won't give him the satisfaction." Inside the Vengeance, the crew moved like a single organism. Engineers rerouted power to shields. Tactical officers targeted enemy command ships. Pilots weaved through debris, using the environment to their advantage. "They fight like humans," Mason muttered. "Fast, unpredictable, relentless." Arya nodded. "Exactly. That's why we survive. That's why we win." The Vengeance fired a concentrated plasma barrage directly at Valkor's command vessel. The shields shimmered, groaning under the force. With a precise strike from the front cannons, the hull cracked. Valkor roared in rage. "Impossible. How can they survive again?" On board the Zerath flagship, Valkor abandoned strategy. He engaged in direct combat, moving like lightning. His claws slashed through corridors, cutting down human soldiers with brutal speed. But humanity had learned patience and unity. Arya led a strike team aboard the ship, teleporting directly into the main chamber. She confronted Valkor face to face for the first time. "It ends here, Valkor," she said. Her rifle gleamed with energy. He laughed, a chilling sound. "You are brave, little human." But bravery is not enough. They fought, fast, deadly, and precise. His strength was overwhelming, but Arya's agility, tactics, and determination matched him. Mason and the team disabled key systems, while Arya engaged Valkor directly. Sparks flew, energy blades clashed, and the chamber shook from the battle outside. "For Earth," Arya whispered and delivered a final devastating strike to his chest armor. Valkor fell, defeated. His red eyes dimmed. For the first time in a millennium, the last Zerath warlord was gone. The news spread instantly across the galaxy. The last hunter is dead. Planets celebrated. Freed species lit the skies with banners, fireworks, and songs. Humans and their allies shared victory, not as conquerors, but as protectors. On Earth, children looked up at the night sky, stars reflecting in their eyes. They had never seen the full blue skies their ancestors remembered, but they felt its freedom. Arya stood on the rebuilt surface of New Terra, looking at the crowd of humans and aliens who had gathered. She spoke quietly, yet her voice carried across the square. They hunted every species, believing none could stop them. They thought fear was power. They were wrong. Humanity endured, humanity learned, and humanity rose not to conquer but to protect. Years passed. The galaxy healed. Old ruins of the Dominion were turned into learning centers, memorials, and peaceful colonies. Humans led diplomatic councils not as rulers but as guardians. "We remember the past," Arya said during a galaxy-wide address, "so no one ever hunts without consequence. Strength is not in fear but in unity. Courage is not in destruction, but in standing for life." The stars, once haunted by fear, now shone brightly over a galaxy reborn. Even centuries later, tales of humanity's rise were told, of the survivors who hid in the ashes of Earth, of the Vengeance, the ship that carried hope through darkness, of Commander Arya Solon, the human who led the final strike against the Hunters, and of the Zirath Dominion, once unstoppable, now extinct. In every system, the message was the same: do not underestimate those who endure, because humanity had learned what no hunter could ever understand. Survival is only the beginning. Growth, courage, and unity are the true strength of a species. And so, the galaxy remembered. They hunted every species, they destroyed countless worlds, but when they came for humanity, they found the one thing they could never kill: the human spirit. The hunted had become the guardians of the stars. And in the light of countless suns, humanity stood, vigilant, unbroken, and eternal.